What's up, beautiful people on YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. V here, back with another exciting German reaction. This one is Germans eat differently than Americans, and this is by FELI from Germany. Okay, do Germans really eat differently from Americans? One thing I'll say is I've never seen Germans eating with their hands. Okay. I think they eat their pretzels and stuff with their hands and all of that. But then, if they have a particular dish that they will have to dip into a sauce, I've not really seen Germans, using their fingers. And again, when they want to eat their pork meat and stuff like that, they use their bare hands, to pick the meat. If I am wrong, correct me in the comment section. Let's go right into this video and find out how why Feli says Germans eat. Okay, this is actually a question. Let us find out what this is about.
Der picked a good restaurant. I think they like it here. How do you know they're American? Did you hear them talk? Nee, I can tell by the way they're eating. Hallo, Servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. Now, what I just showed you in the intro scene with American tourists in Germany also happens to me here in the US. When I'm at a restaurant, I kind of stand out, and it has happened to me before that I was asked if I was European because of the way I eat. Now, of course, this difference doesn't apply to all Americans and all Europeans, as always with these type of things, but it's definitely a cultural difference that's pretty widespread, yet super subtle and not something that a lot of people are aware of. But once you know what to look for, you'll be able to spot Americans in Europe and Europeans in the US with ease. Now, what is this big, mysterious difference in how Americans and Germans eat? Let's take a look at this Instagram story that I posted a few months ago of Ben, my American boyfriend, and me, a German, at brunch. This was his plate as he was eating. Apparently this was French toast. Glad I wrote that down. I don't think I would have recognized it otherwise. And this was me eating my pancake. Can you spot the difference?
Let's do another example with something savory, like steak. Wait, I'm vegetarian. Let's do a vegetarian burger patty for me instead, but the concept stays the same. Ben goes ahead and cuts up a piece of the steak, knife in his right hand, fork in the left. Then he puts the knife down, switches the fork to his right hand, and eats the piece with just the fork. Then he moves the fork over again, picks up his knife, cuts, switches again, and eats. This is often referred to as the zigzag method, or as the American author Mark van Honecker called it in his Slate article on the topic, the cut and switch method. I, on the other hand, keep the knife in my right hand the entire time. I cut off a piece and then put it in my mouth right away, keeping my fork in the left hand like this. If I need to scoop something up from my plate, I just turn the fork around and slide the food on there with my knife, but the fork is still in my left hand, even though I'm right-handed. Ben, however, keeps his fork in the right hand for scooping.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, this isn't something that's exclusive to Germans, but it's how people eat pretty much all over Europe, and I'm sure in other countries as well. In fact, it's actually the Americans that are the outliers here. Ironically, Americans initially got this habit from Europe, from the French to be precise, who, as food scholar Dara Goldstein describes it, were considered the arbiter of elegance at the time. Before forks became common at European dining tables, most people just used a knife and, if needed, a spoon to eat. The Italians started using forks around the 11th century due to pasta becoming a big part of their diet, and by the 16th century, it was pretty universal among all societal classes in Italy. From there, it then spread to other southern European countries like Spain, Portugal, and France, but the rest of Europe didn't fully adopt the fork until the 18th century. Now, apparently, around that time, it had become fashionable in France to put the knife down after cutting and switch the fork to the right hand to eat. One possible explanation for this is that historically, knives were often considered a threat. So for good manners, you wanted to keep the knife out of your hand as much as possible. That's also why people were accustomed to putting their knives down with the blade facing them, which, if you think about it, is still how we do it today. Author Mark van Honecker found a few more factors that may have been relevant here.
It's also possible that it was considered more delicate to eat with your dominant hand, which for most people, of course, is their right hand.
He also brings up that the perception of the left hand being unclean in many cultures could have played a role here as well. And he quotes author Harry Mount, who wrote a book called How England Made the English. Greater inefficiency can infer greater elegance. So maybe it was considered fancy just because of how unnecessarily elaborate it was. Regardless of the reason behind it, fact is, Americans adopted this fancy habit from the French in the 19th century, right when the French themselves were about to drop it. Apparently, a French etiquette book from 1853 already stated that the new trend was not to switch. So all throughout Europe, people started keeping the knife in their right hand throughout the entire meal. But this switch never made it to the US, which is why today we differentiate between the American style of eating and the European, or also called continental style. So just like with imperial measurement units, the American eating etiquette does have its origins in Europe, but while Europeans decided to move on from it over 150 years ago, the only ones that are still holding on to it today are Americans. And to us modern day Europeans, it seems a little impractical, to be honest. Another difference between the two styles is the placement of the left hand whenever it's not in use. So in the American style, every time you put down your knife. You then typically put your left hand underneath the table on your lap, which in Europe, on the other hand, is a big no-no. Your hands are always supposed to be visible there, so if you eat something like pasta or soup where your left hand is free, you just place it on the table next to your plate. Now, even though you'll still see lots of people in the US who cut and switch, experts are observing that this is slowly becoming outdated, and more Americans, especially the younger ones, are using the more efficient European style, or they're mixing different styles according to their own preferences.
So to get back to our steak example, you might see people cut up the entire steak all at once and then switch their fork to start eating it, like Ben does with his breakfast food. Which I'm thinking might be a way to take the traditional American method and make it a little more efficient. But you'll also see some people here do it the European way and just leave their fork in the left hand as they cut and eat.
Now, just a heads up for all of you who like to cut everything up at once and then eat it. In Europe, that's usually something that you only do for kids. So if you come to Europe and do that at a restaurant, don't be surprised if you get a few weird looks. I mean, it's up to you if you care about that or not. I feel like it's just fair.
I'll say that Germans don't always mind their business. Like, they always have a look, like they always want to stare if you're doing the wrong thing. Why is it that you guys don't like minding your business? I mean, if I decide to cut my food entirely before I start eating, it's my choice. Don't give me that look. Hello?
To point that out, but it's not like they're going to kick you out of the restaurant. Except if you're in Italy and do this with your spaghetti and you're not 8 years or younger, I feel like they might actually kick you out of the country. And I know that some Americans do cut up their spaghetti or break them in half before boiling them, which in Germany is definitely considered weird. In Italy, that's a straight up sin. Now, of course, it's also not like all Europeans eat the same. Italians typically roll their spaghetti on the side of the plate, for example. Well, in Germany, I'm not sure if other countries do this too, but in Germany, it's pretty common to use a spoon to roll them up. And apparently in the UK, they always keep their fork facing down, even when they scoop things like mashed potatoes or peas on there. They just scoop it onto the back of the fork and somehow balance it on there. Well, in Germany, it's normal to turn your fork around for this. One thing that I would say is true for pretty much all of Europe, though, is that it's not quite as common to eat things with your hands as it is in the US. So don't be surprised if you see people eat things like pizza with a fork and knife. It'll also usually not come pre-cut at Italian restaurants, and everyone usually orders their own pizza. And at a sit-down burger restaurant, you might even see Europeans eat their burger with a fork and knife, especially those super tall ones. Now, there are a lot more differences regarding eating customs and dietary preferences between Germany and the US. If you've been following my channel for a while, you've probably heard me talk about the love story between Americans and disposable dishes, for example, which most Europeans find a little dubious. Or we could talk about what time people eat dinner in the US compared to other countries, or how much value is put on the ritual of eating. Like how in France, France, lunch breaks are often between 1 and 2 hours compared to 30 minutes in the US, and people despise eating on the go. But all of that might be for another video. In the meantime, if you want to find out more about the reasons why Americans have a bigger problem with obesity compared to Germans, make sure to check out this super interesting video by Nelf. Now, what other differences in eating habits and table etiquette have you noticed between cultures? I'd be super curious if maybe I missed something between.
That was quite an interesting one by FELI from Germany. Now, I would say that in my country, except you are in a formal setting, like to the best of my knowledge, except you are in a formal setting, like you hardly find most people, using fork and knife. Most of the time, we use our hands to eat things like rice and stew, jollof rice at home. Okay, some people find it more comforting to use their bare hands to eat, and I'll say most of our traditional dishes requires you use your hands. Like we have a soup and a swallow, so you use your hands to eat it. Well, anyways guys, that was such an interesting one to watch and learn from FELI, and I hope you enjoyed my reaction. Do like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, and if you would like to see my reaction to the Shade crash, you can watch this particular video here, and if you want to see a playlist of all of my reactions recently, you can click on this playlist right here. Anyways guys, so thank you so much for watching, and see you right in my next one. Bye.